Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another positive talk. Feels good to get two out of the way this week. I definitely enjoy having these lives and getting to bring on amazing guests to have conversations. And since we are getting so close to Election Day, I decided that I would invite guests on so that we can talk politics, because I think that these conversations need to be had and people need to be more aware. So I will bring. If you saw my story, I shared one of his posts. There we go. I'm out of frame. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well, man. How
Oh,
are you?
I'm doing good. Today, the weather is perfect here in Virginia, so I'm enjoying it.
I'm in California. I might beat you on the weather game.
Yeah, you've got the like almost year-round nice weather, whereas like I really enjoy the fall that we get here. So, plus we
What's
just had a
wild is you
really.
can really see in my lifetime the change just because of climate change. Where, like, when we moved here to the Bay Area about 20 years ago, you'd get like one, maybe 2 weeks of like 80 plus degrees, and now it's like you get a month's worth of it. It's crazy. We literally went from like 85-degree weather, and then immediately it's fall. Immediately it's like 58 degrees today, which I'm all for.
Yeah, I'm loving the hoodie weather that we're starting to get here. And of course, here in Virginia, our leaves are starting to like go crazy with colors, and absolutely love that.
Speaking of change in Virginia, how long have you been in Virginia? Have you been there your whole life? Because I'm very curious, because it was not a blue state for very long, you know?
Yes. I was born in Northern Virginia, right under DC,
Mm, the,
and
the,
I've
the
moved away.
liberal part.
Yeah, I moved away for a little bit, and then I came back because I love the state of Virginia just because I'm a country boy. I love the mountains. I lived in a lot of places where mountains didn't exist, and realized that it's nice to kind of exist where I've got the beach, I've got the mountains, and
Mhm.
then we've got a few little bubbles of cities where I feel safe to be an LGBT person.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, well, I will go ahead and let you introduce yourself so people know who you are, and then we can dive into a conversation.
Great. So yeah, my name is Keegan. You can find me at Keegan Tatum, Keegantatum. My main platform is TikTok, where I've got like 4 times the amount of followers that I do here on Instagram, but I'm doing pretty well on Instagram as well. I talk about the psychology of politics primarily, though in this late election push, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, I've been doing a lot of, anti-Trump, why the Democrats are better. Even if you're a leftist, they're a lot better.
Yeah,
I also do live streams every week or so on my TikTok, and you can also find me at Keegan Tatum on YouTube. I have some video essays there. What is the psychology of transphobia? In a video that's more than a minute and a half long, why are old people more conservative, psychologically speaking? So, if you want the longer form content, YouTube's the way to go. But yeah, Keegan Tatum anywhere.
I love it. And yeah, I started out with YouTube many years ago, and the struggle to transition into 15-second clips for me has been tough, but I've absolutely loved how you utilize your platforms on TikTok and Instagram to pack those like 15 seconds, 30 seconds, minute with so much useful information. I know that the ones that I've come across, I'm like, yes, he is saying what I've been thinking, because I'm definitely into the psychology in the mind. And when you sit there and you listen to some of the things that are going on, sometimes you just go, how can you possibly hear this being said and think this? And so many of your videos have really put a spin on it where it educates people in a way where it's like, oh, okay, the human psychology does play a role in politics and how things are turning out right now.
Oh, enormously, yes. I really thank you for the compliment. One of the cool things about like when you find in somebody new is like, wow, they said the thing that I couldn't quite articulate. And to be able to be on the other end of that equation, to receive that compliment is just enormously rewarding. So thank you for it.
Yeah, no problem. What got you into creating content like this? Because I think that it's definitely needed, and it's a niche that I haven't found a lot of people. I'm sure you've probably connected with a few more people since you create the content. But what drove you into this field of content?
I've always wanted to do media. I actually went to university. I went to Syracuse for my undergrad, and they have a very good broadcast school. And I went there thinking I want to do baseball play-by-play. I'm a huge baseball fan. It's torturous to root for my Padres. They just choked in the playoffs. But I I had like the next wave of political awakening when I was about 19 years old, and I realized I can't just talk about baseball. Baseball is not like this enormously culturally relevant, has an impact on people's lives in a material way. And I just felt like in the one life that I have, I've got to use whatever skills I have to try to make the world a little bit of a better place. And I've always wanted to do progressive or lefty media. As it, Political psychology came a little bit later, though. So, and I was like you, I was grinding out on YouTube, and I just wasn't quite great at it. You can, if you go into those unlisted videos, you can find some not very confident Keegan videos, and for whatever reason, the structure of having to make a video that's 60 to 90 seconds, I think gives me the nice rails on which I can put my train on, you know? Um, and I'm autistic, so that's probably part of it. You know, I like the structure.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely feel like I've been working on getting better at like really nailing the points and getting it to as short as possible because I think a lot of my YouTube videos when I was making them were anywhere between like 10 minutes long to like 20 minutes long. And I've been doing it a while and being someone who went to a lot of events to meet other content creators and hearing how algorithms work, the hook points and everything like that were super important with YouTube, but like when it comes to content on even quicker things that are being absorbed by people viewing it, it's really important for you to kind of grab their attention right away and then give
Yeah.
them the information just as quickly.
Isn't it crazy to be on the analytics end and to be like, wow, most people are out within 3 seconds. Like that's just crazy to think about. And
Yeah,
YouTube isn't much
you're like,
different, but
yeah,
yeah.
you're sitting there thinking like that wasn't even like the juicy part. Like the juicy part comes in 10 seconds. You just
Oh,
needed a
I
couple
know.
more seconds in.
I know, right? I had a great collab video that was like that with Nomiki Konst where we talked about undecided voters. And it's like the great part of it is like seconds 30 to 60. And it's like, no, and there's no way to edit around it. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a giant editing challenge. How did you get into media? What motivated that?
So it was a complete accident for me. I was a very introverted, shy child. And when I went to college, I came out as gay. And being someone who grew up in a very small town, the news spread like wildfire. And everyone was like asking me questions. And maybe it's you just haven't met the right girl, all the nonsense that LGBT people hear when they first come out to people who don't understand it. And I was like, I'm just going to make a video saying, no, it's not that I haven't met the right girl. I've known since this time. And at the time, because this was back in 2008, Facebook only allowed you to post 2 minute videos. And like I said, I can talk.
Hmm.
So my video is probably like 15, 20 minutes long. And so someone suggested loading it to YouTube and then sharing the link to Facebook. So at that time, YouTube's not at all what it is today. So I shared it, not knowing there was a button to make it private or public. So I publicly announced in 2008 to everyone that searched gay or coming out that I was gay. And so that kind of sparked me going into it. It wasn't right away. Like I didn't know it existed like publicly until 2 years later when someone asked me how I dealt with all the hate. And I was like, what hate? None of my Facebook friends really posted anything hateful. And they're like, no, on the YouTube platform. I'm
Oh
like,
God, yeah.
oh no.
If there's any comment section that might rival Facebook in terribleness, it's that YouTube comment section. Oh my God.
Yeah, the keyboard warriors definitely took advantage of that video and let me know how they felt. But at the same time, when I went, there were some in there where people were very inspired by the authenticity and vulnerability I shared, which I thought was with people I knew, but apparently it was with the world. And that kind of threw me into the media part. And I saw sharing my story as something that people could connect with. And so I started, you know what? If I make one video and it touches one person, it's worth it. And just kind of went on that cycle. And I think it wasn't until the pandemic that I made the hard switch over to the Instagram platform, just because 2020 was a big year with movements, with an election year, with the global pandemic. I felt like talking about me was putting the spotlight where it shouldn't be. And I was like, how can I do something that's important? And I thought sharing perspectives of others and hearing how they're navigating through all these things and still finding a way to be positive and productive. And so I just started this series called Positive Talks. It wasn't intended to go as far as it has. It really was to get us to election day in 2020, because I was like, let's just be the light, be the hope that these people need. Because in 2016, I was too scared and shy to politically align myself with anyone at that time publicly. Voted for Hillary at the time, but didn't speak about it. And I felt horrible once the election came and we ended up with Trump. I was like, I'm never going to be quiet again, not doing that.
Oh, I love that. That's great. That's a fantastic motivation right there. By the way, somebody asked, what planet is that? It's Earth. You may have heard of it.
Some of us do live there.
Some of us, yes.
Awesome.
Some people seem to be living in a different reality. I don't know.
Yeah, that's definitely what I wanted to dive into with you, because I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes when I'm having conversations with people, it feels like we're not seeing anything of the same reality, and it's hard to have conversations with people. Mostly, like, I grew up in rural America, so Christianity is a very in your face thing everywhere I lived. But it
Gross.
almost seems like the cross and pictures of Jesus have been replaced with Trump. I've even seen more Christians having Trump standing in front of a cross than I have seen Jesus in front of the cross. So I wanted to bring that to the conversation of, how do you think, because when we think back to like Bill Clinton and what he did, and how condemning that was to his political career, and now we're here in 2024 where Christians who condemn someone for doing anything outside of their marriage was horrible, now we're kind of excusing it and navigating those waters. It can be really confusing. I've even had the conversation with my grandmother where I'm like, I'm confused because all the morals you taught me to like grow up as don't seem to align with this candidate that you're throwing your vote behind.
Yes. Well, boy, there's a lot to that, isn't there? I would say the primary reason is because people on the right and people on the left think of morality differently. So people on the left, on average, will see it more in terms of how we treat one another, in terms of outcomes, in terms of consequences, the effect on people's lives. Somebody just dropped something in the other room, and um, and people on the right think of it differently. It's more of a team thing. It's more of like my team good, your team bad. And this is why there's so much hypocrisy. This is the main reason why there's so much hypocrisy. There's multiple. And and when you add in one of the strongest predictors of being right wing is having a low degree of emotional intelligence. Well, when you think about emotional intelligence, what do you think about? Self-awareness. It's like one of the first things, right? Compassion, empathy, right? But if you lack self-awareness because you don't do introspection, because you avoid self-reflection, which has also been found with conservatives, well, you're probably not going to notice how the way that you're pointing that finger also applies to you. Um, and they just become blinded by the team playing. It's like it's sports almost, where they assume because they have a very restricted, like, how do I put this? It's they very much struggle to understand people that are different, and this comes about because of closed-mindedness. This comes about because of brain differences, and as a result, they project the way that they think onto other people, right? So they assume we're just as dishonest team playing hacks as they are. And that, that's why they do the whole whataboutism, right? Oh yeah, well you guys do that too, right? Trump's how do do I put this in a way that doesn't get us age restricted? You know how he's friends with that guy who had the private island, and there were
Yes.
some crimes, and there was the Lolita Express. Do we remember that? If you
Yes.
mention this to a Trump supporter, they're like, "Oh yeah, well, Bill Clinton," and it's like, dude, that MFR hasn't been relevant for 25 years. This is your best whataboutism, and it's just because they're like, well, okay, sure, there's flaws with my team, but there's flaws with your team too. Um, ah, that was a lot of different ideas that I just kind of threw at you, so I hope that
No,
that kind of
no,
answers it
no,
somewhat.
no, I
And to a
like
certain
it
extent, they
because,
just don't care.
yeah,
Like, you got to understand, like, so much of what's difficult for me when talking with right wingers is like, I'm autistic. I will take people literally, right? And I just assume that they're representing themselves honestly, because that's what I do, right? Like, I'm a socialist, okay? I am anti-capitalist. I think that the workplace should be run democratically. I think that everyone within the workplace should have ownership within that. I know that's not a popular opinion, right? That's a very radical left idea. I'm upfront about it. I'm upfront that I think gender is BS and that we should grow out of these kinds of rigid ideas about it. And it's like, why can't they just be honest? And so one of the things we always need to remember is they're not. They know they're not a lot of the time, or they've convinced themselves that they are, even if they deep down know that they're dishonest. It's not just brainwashing; they just don't care. They
yeah,
just don't care a lot of the time. You know,
yeah,
they like Trump. He resonates with them emotionally. That's what really matters more than anything.
yeah. I've definitely had a lot of conversations with different people trying to understand their perspective because I try to be an open-minded person. I don't try to condemn someone for something that I haven't had a personal conversation with them about, just because I want to be that open-minded, understanding person. But I've definitely seen when it comes to
Can I say?
being in those types of conversations, go for it.
Part of open-mindedness is one of the strongest predictors of having more liberal mindset, by the way. Just that's like the number one personality difference between people on the right and people on the left.
Yeah, and it it was very obvious when I was having those conversations that they were very loving and accepting of me giving them space to share their opinion. But when it came my turn to kind of share my knowledge and why I have the opinions that I do, it was being interrupted every second and belittling me and speaking lower of what I'm coming at. And it's very interesting to kind of try to navigate those conversations. And the thing that I know with psychology is there's like the primitive brain that just functions in a way that it's like survival, fight or flight. These are things that I feel that people on the left, it's really easy for us to say like the people on the conservative side are idiots or don't have brains of their own. They just follow a leader. But I feel
True.
like the leadership, the leadership on that side understands that
Yes.
mentality. And it's almost like once you kind of become aware that they're using your brain against you, it's almost like why are you not more afraid that these people are fully aware that they know how to manipulate you to the fullest extent and you're still going to go with it. And for me that's terrifying. Every book that I read to understand like, oh, if this is what happened in your childhood, this is probably how you are as an adult, I'm like, I don't like that this book knows me so well, like that my human brain functions exactly like a psychologist can understand,
I hate that I'm
because
predictable, damn it.
that just means that like we're able to be studied and people can use that to help you or they can use it against you. And in a lot of cases I'm sitting there like you're they're convincing you to hurt yourself and it's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the church has known about the religious organizations have known about how to manipulate people for power and profit for as long as that has existed. I I would say that, look, I'm not going to disagree with MAGA people being less intelligent. That's just what the data shows. That's what everyone's experience with these people shows. But I would say more importantly is emotional intelligence, the ability to be able to see outside yourself and project yourself into somebody else's experiences, to feel what they feel, to be able to understand a different perspective, theory of mind, if anyone's familiar with theory of mind, um, empathy and self-awareness. Like these are actually more important when it comes to what affects your political views than your cognitive abilities, because so much of politics is not a rational analysis of policy and history. Like, how many people operate that way? It's very, very few. Maybe you do, maybe people in the audience do. We aren't the normal people. We aren't the normal voter. As frustrating as that is, most people go off of vibes and a set of emotional biases. And boy, it is I wish people could I wish emotional intelligence was much more part of our education because, you know, somebody just asked in the comments like, listen, the Republicans are pure id. How do we break them out of it? And the honest answer is education when people are young. Those first few years of your life are so determinative of the kind of person you will be. And quite frankly, I think that the closed-mindedness that you describe is so strong that it's really hard to break a MAGA person out for the same reasons it's very hard to break somebody out of a cult.
Yeah. Yeah.
And God, we could spend the entire rest of the time just talking about why it's
Uh,
difficult, you know? The sunk cost fallacy on an emotional level, right? Like, well, I've already put so much of my identity. I mean, God, look at these Trump people. Think about how much of their ego, their identity, the way that they see themselves is through being MAGA. If they were to admit that they're wrong and that those damn liberals that they hate so much are right, I mean, think about that kind of a threat to one's ego.
yeah. I mean that's definitely what I've seen when it comes to having conversations with people where it's like you can spit facts after facts that are backed by data, but we've gotten to the point now where we've also made science something that people on that side don't trust. And I think that that's the scariest part for me when it comes to no that like we're seeing them want to take professionals out of their seats of power and place people that they chose in those seats, whether they have a background in that space or not. And it's terrifying to think like we're thinking books are starting to be looked at as, you know what? I don't like how this paints us. We're taking it out. It's wrong. It's not good. Whereas when you're seeing a lot of liberal people, they're becoming more awakened to themselves. And I think that it's really important for people to understand that there's a level of influence you have, and then there's just people who are out of your reach. And I've
Yes.
learned that there are people who do have some type of emotional connection to me. There is something that connects us, whether it's family, whether it's friendship, whether it's a significant other to someone that I'm really close friends with. You have to understand that sometimes there are people out there that are a waste of your energy. And the keyboard warriors out there that you are just a faceless person on the internet, it's a waste of time and energy to exist in
Yes.
those spaces. Protect your energy, put it in something that's more effective because there are people who are on the fence that just need that nudge. There are people who are just like voting doesn't matter, that just need that nudge. Those people are a lot easier to have those conversations with and educate them than someone, like you said, who lacks emotional intelligence. Those people don't see or hear you whatsoever in those instances, and you really are just blowing hot air into their face, and you're not going to change anything.
Yes. This that right there. Yeah, that's very similar to a video I'm going to make right before the holidays, right before Thanksgiving, because a lot of people is a little insider information here. All right, it's which I'll only ever share on a live, um, which is like so many people ask like, how can I reach my family member who's conservative, you know, what have you, and the honest answer is you either enjoy the argument or you don't have it and you don't try to convince them. There's no hope. Have you ever experienced this where you do have a conversation with a right winger, you do break through a little bit with the facts, like maybe you go with like some populist economic stuff that they can connect with, right? Some anti-elitism, and then they seem like they're on your side, And then next time you see them, it's like that was a drug that just wore off, and they're right back into the stupidity. And it's like, we just made progress. Come on, man. It's like being able to think was a temporary effect. Don't have you ever
uh,
had that?
Yes.
Yes.
It's like your energy and aura extended to them for a few minutes and
Yes.
you left them for too long and they got wrapped back up into their current situations and thoughts. And I mean, social media doesn't help. The media doesn't help because I feel like we've gotten to the point where everything that happens in this world is very created in the media to cater to the people's needs. I'm the type of person when I hear insane things and I'm like, there's no way this person could have possibly done this publicly. I will go and check the internet and find many sources. I'm like, oh no, it did happen. That
Yeah.
is what was said. That is what they're doing. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, if we live in that type of day and age now, all they have to do is spit out anything out of their mouths and their followers and people will listen. It doesn't matter if the opposite side fact checks them and shares media showing how false this information is, because at that point, they're not even seeing this media and they've already allowed it to match their rhetoric in a way that they're going to move forward with it no matter what. Like you said earlier, them having to admit that they were wrong or got worked up and loud about something and were wrong is something they're not willing to back down on. And it's really hard
Hmm.
to have that conversation when it's like, I will admit, like, if there's something that someone I support, follow, or like have done positive talks with does something, I'll be like, you know what? That doesn't align with me. Um, no one's perfect, but I definitely do not condone that type of behavior. I will admit that like someone I follow isn't perfect, but I'm just like, I don't see that on the other side.
No, it's very black and white on the other side. Now, I have a question for you, because you've kind of brought this up twice now, which is, do you think it's getting worse? Do you think that the perhaps the authoritarian submission is getting worse, whatever you want to call it, the delusion is getting worse, the breaking out of reality? Do you think that's getting worse? Oh, and what would be the other one? Um, the hypocrisy would be getting worse. Just the anti-intellectualism. That was the one, and that them wanting their people in regardless of their qualifications. Do you think that that's getting worse?
I do, mainly because I think that there's every step they push to see how far they can get away with something.
Okay.
Like in 2016, I mean, even when Obama was elected president, I felt like Trump and a lot of people went way too far with what they were saying about him and what they were doing. But I feel like we're starting to be more divided. Whereas I think in 2016, there was a very clear divide, but now there's almost like a divide and a huge gap that
Yes.
someone would have to jump over to get to the other side. And that jump is very uncomfortable. And a lot of times, while people are trying to make a jump, get pulled back. But I do have a lot more hope in seeing some of the Republicans say, hey, I'm a Republican, but I can't vote for Trump. That gives me a little bit of hope just because some of the hatred that I'm seeing, I am just confused of how anyone could align themselves with that much hatred being spewed out of someone's mouth. I almost feel like there is Trump's supporters, there are Republicans, and there are Democrats, and then there's everybody else that doesn't exist in there. But like, I really wish that more people that were Republicans that were voting for Trump started to disalign themselves because there are so many qualified candidates out there in the Republican Party that could exist in a way that doesn't divide our nation more. But I feel like we've got a candidate there that everything he does is to rip the tear further and further apart.
Well, I will say, I think first off, I think the Republican Party is broken. I think they are changed for a couple generations,
Okay.
and I think they have to be defeated. I don't think there's anything good gained from, oh, we need to restore the Republican Party back to like it was during Reagan, when they were letting gay people die of AIDS and mocking it, when they were cutting taxes on the rich and letting a million people become homeless. Like, Millions of
Yeah.
people going into poverty. We need to restore that Republican Party. What the good old days of the Iraq War? Like, no, these people are super messed up. So here's what I think, and this might be a little unpopular of an opinion. I don't actually think it's getting all that much worse. I actually think that the conservative base in this country has always been this delusional, hate-filled, divorced from reality, and authoritarian. I just think that what's changed is that there are a fewer percentage of our population that leans conservative or is slightly conservative, and that those people have either become more moderate, more liberal, um, or they have just gone to the far right. But I think that the far right base, while it has grown a little bit, has ultimately been the same to its core. I just think that they didn't have media representation back during the fairness doctrine. You didn't have like those kinds of people on TV. You didn't have um, social media to represent these people's views. And even with Fox News in the 90s and 2000s, they didn't go super mega ultra far right because they were the most right wing thing in town. So those people would go to Fox News, super far right, mega awful authoritarian fascist people. They would go to Fox News because it's the best in town. It's the same like argument with the Democrats where it's like if you're very progressive, what else are you going to do? You got to vote for the Democrats, right? I think Fox News had that same ideology. And then when social media comes out, oh my God, now people can go to Alex Jones and Newsmax and all these completely deranged. And so Fox News makes the adjustment because now they got more competition and now they're representing more of the fascist people. But I really think there's always been that fascist core. I mean, you go back to the 60s, you look at George Wallace, these people have largely been the same because their psychology is the same. And it's not like we've taken some giant step in evolution. But what's good is that I think that while that far right, maybe it used to be 20%, now it's 25%, or it used to be 25% and now it's 30%, the number of slightly conservative people is like rapidly diminishing because with online media and with the ability to search anything you want, just like you said, hey, listen, you're a not lazy person, so you're able to just look up, is fracking good or bad? Has the technology changed? What about climate change? Or how does the minimum wage, does it actually affect unemployment? The answer is no, it does not affect unemployment, by the way. You could just look all this up. You could look up the history of the party switch and figure out, oh, the Democrats used to be the right wing party, and all these right wing lies about how progressives were pro slavery is all stupid, right? We can all look this stuff up. And I completely forget the point I was going on about. And as a result, like if you grew up online, like the facts just have such a progressive bias. Like, how would you not be a progressive? And so that's why we're seeing such an increase in the percentage of the population that's progressive. And I think that that's taking away from the people who used to lean right. Um, so, yeah. My point is now over. I didn't land that very well, but it's now over. It's more of a
No,
hard cut.
no, it brought up a great point for me because this is something that I've been like pondering on when it comes to like I I agree with you that I feel like a lot of people's really horrible thoughts have always existed. I do think that the more social media that exists, the more they were able to explore and test how far can I go, how mean can I be, and still have people support me. And yeah, you can test that. You can have a YouTuber who steps over the line and goes too far, gets canceled, and they're like, okay, that's the line you don't cross right now. But they slowly move that further and further as they're expanding because you look at the messages that they are saying now and you never heard it before. I always told people those were like behind closed doors conversations. Now they're
Yes.
in front of large
Yes.
audiences. And I think that they've tested the waters enough to see, hey, we can get away with saying all these things that we've thought. Because being someone who grew up in a rural place, I heard a lot of those things being said. I never saw them said publicly. It was always like, oh, yes, ma'am, sir. And then they walk, get in the car, and then they say the offensive thing that they were thinking. So I
Yeah.
definitely don't think they grew more racist or more transphobic or homo. They've always had those thoughts.
Yes.
It's just I believe Trump showing up in 2016, even while Obama was president, Trump was like gathering his like followers of people who aligned with him throwing out the racist slurs and things that he was doing. But how do you feel
It
having,
gives them permission. Let's
yeah,
land
how
the
do you
plane.
feel
Here we
like
go.
Obama becoming
Yeah.
president impacted those people's desire to be more loud, be more public about it? Because I feel like always having a white male president sitting in the highest seat of power gave them that sense of like there is a place where your minority status stops you and only white people can exist. And when Obama took the White House, you saw so much like criticism and people's loudness. Like I've told people I'm grateful that Trump has come into existence because it helped me see people clearer, because
That's a
some people are
silver
really
lining.
good at
Oh
putting
my
on an
God.
act.
Well, you're really
it
taking positive talk to the next dimension right there, man. Because this is why
no,
Trump
I
is so bad for our culture, right? So any person on the left, and there's a very small faction, but I try to talk to these people, right? There's a very small faction of people on the left that are hyper online and they think, duh, Democrats and Republicans are the same, blah 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 blah, right? And they just don't see much of a problem with Trump being the president. And it's like right here, this is the problem. He gives people permission to be their worst selves. And by the way, what you're saying, it actually reminds me of like landlords where, in public, oh, we're providing a housing service. We just want everything to be fair. And behind closed doors, they're like bragging about how much money they're making on passive income and how they don't have to work and how they're so smart and they're just trying to take as much money from people as possible. It's like, it's the same kind of thing, right? But
uh,
um, I think Obama broke a lot of people's brains. And I think that when enough of these white conservatives started associating the Democratic Party with that's the party that put a black man in charge, it increased the hate for the Democrats. One of the things you'll notice when you see interviews with these Trump people is it's not just racism, it's not just that they hate immigrants, it's not just that they're massively misogynist and they hate LGBT people, but they really hate Democrats. They really hate liberals. And I think that a lot of that is all the fear mongering and hate that came out of Fox News when Obama was elected. Because they really, I mean, anyone that was consciously aware at that time could tell there was really a big change
yeah.
with right wing hate media. Um, really damaged our country, man. For a couple of generations of people, their brains are just broken. But eh, I was going to have another point. This is great for a live to just sit here and think, isn't it?
No,
The most engaging
I'm the
thing.
same way. There's some days where I'm just like, oh, brain's done right now. You pick up, you say something now because my brain stopped right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I realized that shift, and I wanted to bring it up with you because I felt like when you start to kind of utilize that type of hate, um, I mean, I was blown away when I worked for Best Buy. The KKK is a tax exempt group of people, and they came in to buy TVs for their club. And they pull out their card, and I scan it, and just like Ku Klux Klan pops up across the screen. And I'm like, excuse me, what? Like, what? These people exist still? Like, it's easy to kind of exist in bubbles. Like, I've moved to big cities, and honestly, when I was younger, I was like, look at the world, it's progressing so much. But it was in that bubble. And when I came back to Virginia and went back to the rural areas that I lived in, I sat there and I was like, it hasn't changed at all. Like, it's still sitting in the same spot. And I feel like you said, there's so much importance on focusing on younger people where they're easily manipulated, getting them to understand emotional intelligence, getting them to understand different doesn't mean bad, getting them to understand like there are people in the world doing things very differently and it's working for them. I talked about how I would love to see where high school students have to one of their years go to a different school in a different state. Like country people go to the city, city people go to the country, and then college, everyone has to take a year abroad in a country that's nothing like the United States, so they can see and function. Because I moved a lot, uh, so I had to be picked up, and my belief system was challenged everywhere I went, and I had to kind of learn and adapt. Like, okay, like this is how people do it here. I can adapt to that. Oh, this is how people do it here. I can adapt to that. Or I could say, y'all are all doing it wrong, and sit there like with my heels in the ground and saying, no, I'm not doing anything. But you don't exist in new spaces that way. But now I feel we're giving platforms to large groups of people. When people start spitting nonsense out of their mouth, I'm just like, unfollow, don't share their stuff. If I share it, I'm going to screenshot it and share it without tagging their profile, because so many people don't realize that we're promoting people into their platforms that they now have. When you're sharing their
Yeah.
content attached to their profile, you're literally, yes, you're trying to get your liberal friends to see how horrible it is, but what you're also doing is showing someone who didn't know they existed, that have the same opinions as them, like, hey, I found another one for you. Band together and form a bigger group than you need to. Because, I mean, I think of like the George Floyd situation and the police officers responsible in that. They had their bail just like instantly paid because it was put on such a large platform that all the conservatives came together and put money into getting them bail. And I think that that's what people don't realize is when you give them the platform, they'll take it. They love the attention you're giving them.
Unfortunately, yeah. Actually, a couple things I want to talk about. First off, travel is one of those things that really dissolves your boundaries. And part of the reason why I have the Earth in the background is that I think that one of the most valuable things you can do when you're looking at society or politics is try to take what I call the alien perspective, where you try to remove yourself from cultural assumptions and just the things that you take for granted, right? And when you go to a different place, it dissolves some of those cultural assumptions. It's one of the reasons why travel is just so valuable. The main thing I wanted to talk about, though, is you were saying very early on that, God, it seems like some people in the cities, we keep growing and progressing, and then you move to some other areas, and it's like, God, it's the same. If I were to just have like a bottom line, here's what I want people to take away from my videos. Um, this would be a top two or three thing, is that we are animals and that we are driven by a lot of animal impulses and that we haven't really evolved a lot since being hunter-gatherers. Like we like brain-wise, we've been the same for 300,000 years. We've had anatomically the same body, at least. We've had language for 70,000 years. We haven't evolved much since getting language, right?
Yeah.
And so we should not, just because we're spoiled by our technologically advanced, pretty limited violent society, to think that we don't all have that savage within us, right? Every one of us has that deep within us somewhere. And so, yeah, some people just haven't evolved out of medieval times. It's about 40% of the country, unfortunately, just has the same kind of authoritarian, stuck in their ways, don't think outside the box, just try to survive and don't try to change things, change scary. Um, and yet you see another portion that wants to keep growing and keep progressing. And I actually think we're going to see more and more of that as our lives go on.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you've seen the video where someone created a TikTok where someone from the future comes back and they're like, "Oh my God, there's still people," and they're like, "Yeah, turns out Jesus is real. He came back and took all the Christians," and he's explaining the world has like, there's no hunger, there's
Yeah.
no disease, there's been no wars for 3 generations, and it's just like, yeah, there you see people holding on to something where the science doesn't back up the religion and things that people are following. And when we got rid of all the people who were just so held tight to this belief system, he's like, yeah, the world became a better place because we cared about the climate We cared about each other.
Yeah,
We
caring about each
and
other is the big one.
yeah, so I was just like, it's funny to think about that, but in a lot of situations where you're talking about progressing forward with things, the like wrench in the gears that get put in there is a lot of times when religion comes up as a conversation, and we're seeing a lot of religious things being brought up in politics, although we have that
Unfortunately.
separation of church and state.
Oh
It
my God,
doesn't
wait.
seem to
Oh my
doesn't
God,
seem
you
to
haven't seen
apply.
the. Oh my God, I just realized. So, okay, I haven't released this video on Instagram yet because I release all my videos on TikTok first.
Yeah.
Uh, you don't get money on Instagram Reels. At least I haven't been able to. So, those go up on TikTok first because, I got to pay the bills. But I actually just had a video where I quoted founding fathers on separation of church and state, and like, wow, they have some scathing remarks about religion. I will be uploading that to Instagram later this week, but
Perfect.
it really is amazing how unpatriotic these Christian nationals are, and yet they wrap themselves in the flag. It's like, how can you know so little about our country and then profess to be a patriot? It just astounds me. It really astounds me.
Yeah, yeah. I I mean, when you look at the swastika flags that have been showing up in certain people's rallies,
You can just say they're at MAGA rallies. It's okay.
yeah,
You're,
yeah,
you're
you
safe
just sit there and
saying
you're
that with me.
like, you're you're like, do you align with that? Oh no, I don't align. No, you do. Like it's
Yeah,
there, so you are aligned with it. Like
and the Confederate flag.
it,
It's like they literally rebelled and they killed a bunch of United States soldiers to create a different country.
yeah.
How can
It
you call yourself a patriot?
yeah, it's mind blowing when you're sitting there having that conversation with people. And like I've said, I've walked away from some conversations where I'm just like, look, we're not operating in the same reality here, so I'm gonna step away because I my energy is precious to me, and I'm going to spend it on people where it's effective, not sitting here being hot air again.
Always try to keep in mind, people, if they cared about facts, if they cared about other people, they would know the facts and they would align with progressive values. But they don't care about people. They don't care about people enough to go look things up just to break out of the laziness. And if they cared about facts, they wouldn't be conservative.
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
they just care about different things than you do. I think that there's your axioms where it's like if you kept asking why and how, right? And you get down to like the core of what your beliefs are, and like mine are, I want to maximize human happiness and I want to maximize freedom, right? Just maximizing people's well-being. I don't think a lot of conservatives have those goals. And when I say people, I don't mean me. I don't just mean my family and my friends. I mean everyone. Everyone.
yeah, yeah. So when it comes to, because we know human nature, and the you talked about the brain not being that evolved from centuries ago, when it comes to the human mind and needing to feel like a part of a crowd, safety, um, I mean, Trump definitely does a wonderful job of saying like, y'all don't have to do anything. I will do it for you. Just
Yes.
follow me. I am the shepherd, you are my sheep type of
Yes.
method. And it's one of those situations where because I'm LGBT, like instantly I know my needs aren't going to be met in this space. So I had to learn to step out of the societal norms or a follower who said that they will help me.
Oh, friend,
So for me,
if these people have their ways, you and I are going into the camps, all right?
oh, believe me, that's
And
that's
I don't
been one of the
I don't mean
fears that
that
I've had.
flippantly. By the way, I don't mean that flippantly. I hope everyone understands. Do you know what mass deportations require? You tell me a time in history in which there was an attempt.
Yeah. I
It's
the amount
bad.
of times I've had conversations with people where like the Handmaid's Tale comes up, and I'm like, ugh, it doesn't seem far
No.
that that would be something that we could push and make happen. And uh, the conversations that I've had with LGBT people, and when they're like, you know what, like, do you have an exit plan for like what happens if certain things start happening? And for me being someone who's so public about who I am online, that is something that crosses my mind very frequently of that there are endless things that could happen, and do I continue pushing forward and educating people and improving things where I can, or do I start taking a more silent role in the background and kind of existing? But
Have
I
you
think
come
it's important
to a
for us.
conclusion? I have. I've
Have I?
thought about this. I know what I'm doing.
Go for it. You tell us.
I'm going down with the ship, bud.
Yeah,
I'm staying
same.
here. Like that. The sad reality is like, if we lived in Canada and this was happening in Canada, it'd be a different story. But right now, America is the most powerful country, and with climate change, we don't have much time. And America needs to lead on climate change. And if America falls, the whole world is totally screwed. So, I am under no illusion as to what happens to people who are neurodivergent when fascist dictatorships come to be. I am not unaware of what happens to leftists. I'm going down with the ship, folks. Perhaps that's
Yeah.
easy to say now, though. But yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, like, I
I
can't. I've had to delete. Like, when I started posting on Instagram, I'm like, I play baseball recreationally. I play in a league, and it's like I gotta take down all these photos because I can't have people know where I am, be able to look me up.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, I think that there's a lot of things. I mean, I've learned just from the amount of people I had my address shared. People,
oh
your
God,
information's not as private as you think it is,
no,
and
it isn't.
I I commented on something, and someone took a screenshot of my address and shared it on a hate page, and someone sent it to me, and someone was like, "Give me this man's address. I want to pull a bullet in his head." And my address was shared. So like that made me realize like there's a very good possibility that people can get this information, and if they are hateful enough can take it to those types of steps. But I also realized that the whole journey that I lived in fear and in the shadows and hiding who I was, like that was not the life. Like that was not an enjoyable place to live. So I will fight to have those freedoms continuously, because I don't want to go back to that point where I have to hide in the shadows of who I truly am. But it's very interesting to kind of live in a space where you kind of see all of this happening and feel like you don't have tons of control over it. But what would you say to people who are trying to like navigate this conversation that they're having in their head of what should I do? Like,
Yeah.
should I be a part of the movement? Should I kind of hide and not exist? Because there are still a lot of people who are fighting without being on such social media platforms and doing things, but
Right.
being
Well, there's
very
so many
public.
different ways you can fight, right? You could be fighting for rent control for city council or on against your city council. You could be going door to door to people. You could be doing phone banking. You could be doing your protesting. There's so many different ways that you can politically engage. You could try to form a union. A union being formed will make your workplace better, all these things. And unions help build a progressive movement, right? So it has a kind of downstream effect. Look, I totally empathize, especially if you're a trans person. Like a trans person or an immigrant, I think you are the two biggest targets in this country. You are certainly higher up on the priorities list than, autistic and or autistic leftists, I should say. Um, and if you're trans, like, I actually think you should have a plan of escape. Um, and if you're an immigrant, I think you should have a plan of escape. I don't know. It's so individualized, but I believe very strongly in you have to fight not because you think we will win, but because you think it's the right thing to do. Okay? I watched Lord of the Rings a lot of times when I was growing up. All right? All
Yes.
right. I wear the even star for a reason. All right?
I love it.
You fight because it's the right thing to do. And that's why I do media in the first place. Why am I not doing baseball? Because I just think politics has such an effect on people, and it's the right thing to do to in some way be involved. We can't all be involved for our career.
Yeah.
Some people, we have to have people that do construction and administration and whatever other jobs there are that exist, and you got to take care of your kids or your family or your parents that are disabled or what have you. And but we can all all do something, and you can always do something to fight back, even if it's just voting and getting somebody else out to vote. And if you're in California, voting the right way on the ballot propositions. And if you're in California, watch my video on the ballot propositions, because then you can just spend a minute and a half and you don't have to do the research that I did. There's just so
Yeah,
many ways to fight. I just can't accept when people don't get involved, when people are so whether it's hopelessness or laziness or whatever other motivation. I just can't accept not doing something. I'm
yeah.
judgmental, all right? I'm judgmental of people who do nothing, all right?
No, yeah, yeah. I mean, I've definitely had some conversations with people where I'm very pushy of like, just because you aren't doing what I'm doing doesn't mean you can't do anything. Like,
Yes, it's not
find
black
the way to
and
do
white.
it.
Yeah,
But
it's not black and white. Just some people could do a great deal. Some people can do a little bit. We can all do something.
yeah, and like I said earlier, we all have the power of influence over some people where they are emotionally connected to us in a way that me personally being a stranger on the internet to them, I will have no influence. Whereas
Yes.
you, as a person who they have some level of respect for, there's that level of communication that you alone and other people that they care about can break through something, whereas I, as a stranger, will not have that power. And each of us can do that.
This right here. So people ask me all the time, what's the best way to convince a conservative to not be so conservative? Because I made a video, and I don't know if I've released it on Instagram yet, but it's like, how can you turn a liberal into a conservative? And the answer is fear. You make them afraid. There were experiments done after 9/11, for example, that when you reminded people of 9/11, they became more conservative, right? Because it was a threat to them. And there are other threatening circumstances. There's several studies on this that show that feeling threatened makes you more right wing. What's the reverse, right? What's the reverse? How do you turn a right winger into somebody who's more liberal? And the best answer really is what you're saying, which is it's not going to come from us. We're too distant. The best way to convince somebody of your political views being correct is that they trust you on a more personal level. They can trust you on an emotional level. You're a friend, you're a family member that they care about. That's the way that you convince people. You change the social circle that they're a part of, and that will have downstream effects on, for example, what media they consume.
Yeah. And I shared your post right before the live of people who are like, oh, let's just let Trump win.
Oh
The cycle will
God,
just kind of uh, push itself out. And I loved that you shared when people are operating in fear, like they become more conservative. And I
yes,
love that you brought up the 9/11 thing because a lot of times, like the pandemic was also another thing where people were operating out of fear
yes,
and people were giving up their rights in spaces because they were scared and they're like, oh God, please protect me, save me, pass whatever law you need to pass to like save my life.
yes,
9/11
yes.
was also one of those things where it's like, yeah, like airports, like check everyone, like do everything for my safety. It's really easy when there's that moment of fear to utilize that in a way to move us in a direction that maybe in a moment where we don't feel that same fear. So I love that you posted that, and that's why I reshared it, because I think a lot of people need to realize that that level of fear is growing in those people, and it's not going to get better before it gets like worse there.
See, I'm sure you have videos like the equivalent of what I'm about to say, where you used to have a stupid idea in your brain, and you're trying to like, okay, I had this dumb idea. Please, nobody that has this idea, please grow out of it, right? And accelerationism is the idea that sometimes things have to get worse before they get better, right? And the best example is, well, back when the Republicans crashed the economy that ushered in the Great Depression, America became very progressive, and it's like. Okay. I mean, that's nice that that happened once. There's a bunch of reasons why that happened that aren't what that explanation is. But I remember thinking, oh, maybe it won't be so bad if a Republican takes office because they'll crash the economy and people will blame the Republican and then we'll swing more progressive. And it's like, nah, that just isn't the case. Again, what I was doing in that moment was I was projecting the way that I think onto other people. It's like most people, when they are in economic stress, economic anxiety, not knowing if they're going to be able to make it month to month, that doesn't make people more rational. And that's not going to cause people to do a bunch of research. Like fear does not make people want to go, I'm going to have a very measured day of research trying to figure out which economic policy led to this horrible catastrophe. It's like, no, not going to happen, people. Not going to happen.
I mean, historically, you can look at it, and in moments like that, like people turn to faith, their religion. They go to a spiritual leader that will lead them
Oh,
to safety. So it's
yes.
like the witches, the plagues, all the
Yeah.
war, famine. They're like, God save us, preacher, tell us what we should do. So it in those moments of fear, a lot of people's minds don't go to like, how do we get out of this? It's find someone who knows what to do
Yes.
and follow them blindly. And I think that that's
Yes.
what you're saying there is like people aren't going into this like, wow, the economy is getting worse, like what do we do? It's Trump says he can
Save me.
save us, so follow Trump. Trump knows what he's doing.
Yep.
um,
I
where
could
you're sitting
not have
there.
said it any better myself. Right there. You just made a political psychology video right there.
Woo! Did I do it in 60 seconds though?
I think you did, yeah.
Perfect.
Actually, you
Flip
might
it.
need to extend it a little bit just to make it past the 60-second mark. So you
Oh,
can
I love
monetize
it.
it, Elon.
I love it. Well, I see that we went over the hour, so I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here and having this conversation. I love the perspective that you share, and I love that you're using your platform to educate people on this because every single time I see you pop up, I'm like, oh, I'm listening to the whole thing because it's going to be good. So if people are not following you now, they definitely should. I don't think I found you on TikTok. I don't use that platform as much, so I'll go check you out there as well. And yeah, if there's anything you want to drop right here at the end, I'd love to hear it.
Yes. Yes, just a couple things. So first off, that's like a great compliment. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. You have totally lived up to the title of this live stream. This is very good vibes. We need more people that aren't like grim and depressing when it comes to politics. And thank you to the commenter. I love this conversation. Thank you so much, you two. This was great. Hey, thank you, Michael. We really appreciate it. And and I would like to ask, are you optimistic or pessimistic about what happens in 1 week?
I am optimistic mainly because 2016 happened and it turned me into a warrior that I was not before. So if 2024 happens one way or the other, it will either ignite more warriors to stand up and fight the good fight still. If it goes the way I hope it does, uh, that doesn't mean it's over. That's still we still have a country that is so divided in a world that
Mhm.
needs people to constantly be growing. So I'm looking at it in the most optimistic way possible because either way, it's going to continue forward. Election day is just another day. It's a cutoff for votes, but it's not a cutoff for change.
I really like that. And I do want to inject some more optimism into anyone who's worried, is looking at these polls and freaking out. You know, polling has a lot of problems, especially in the world of no landlines and who's going to vote. We have new electorates because of COVID, where there was an extraordinarily high voter turnout, the highest in a century, over a century, 120 years. We have a new electorate because of what happened with Roe v. Wade being overturned. 2022 featured a different set of voters than previous elections. We're seeing very high turnout amongst demographics, amongst registered Democrats when it comes to early voting. I think people have a lot of reasons to be optimistic. There were a couple weeks in early October where it really seemed like the momentum was going against us. But I think that the Kamala Harris and Tim Walz campaign has really captured that momentum back. It's starting to swing back left. And I think that what happened at Madison Square Garden and the comments by particular people in the Trump administration, uh, comparing him to historical figures of 1930s Germany, I think will have an effect. And as much as the polls can freak you out, keep in mind that there are like political science reasons for why elections go the ways that they go, and that so many of those indicators lean towards Democrats maintaining power. So I think that we're going to be in good shape. But make sure that you go out and vote, especially if you're in one of those swing states. Get out somebody, bring them to the polls. Help them fill out their ballot or something. Okay, FaceTime them if you need. And I think that we have a lot of reasons that we're gonna be able to feel good. But remember, we got to get those down ballots. Okay, we got to get people voting for a representative for the House. We got to get people voting for their state Senate and state assembly, because if Kamala Harris is going to do something, she needs a Congress that's on her side, and obviously the Senate as well. So that's how I'll end it. This was a wonderful conversation. It was a lovely afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to all the content you've got coming out. And if there's ever anything that I can do for you, feel free to reach out. I'd love to stay connected.
I very much appreciate that. Hey, you're free to DM me anytime.
Awesome.
All right.
Have a good one. Bye.